Hello, welcome to this video. Recently I did a video called the 10 most overrated bands of all time, and it has gone on to get a lot of views, and so because I'm a YouTuber I now have to try and repeat that again over and over again to maximize my views. So I went away and with my creative mind I came up with the idea of going through the 10 most overrated albums of all time. Now you may want to know what the most overrated bands are, but the most overrated albums, you know, now we can have a bit of a prod at some bands that are usually pretty good, but that have made some albums which have gone down in history. I'm not saying these albums are bad. You've got to understand, I'm not saying they're bad. What I'm saying is they're overrated. Perhaps their reputation is greater than the actual music contained within. So I've come up with 10 albums here. So you love it when I have a moan, you know. I think you like it when I came on. I'm all positive about brilliant stuff. Let's see these albums here. There's that one I absolutely love. That one I really like. That one I love. That one I love. That one I love. Don't like that one. Don't like that one. That one's okay. And that one I quite like. So you can see I've just run through my list. I don't hate these albums, and some of these albums I absolutely love, but taking an objective view back, I can see how they're overrated. Now, we're going to head straight in, but I do want to say, please take this, you know, with a bit of with my tongue firmly stuck in my cheek. These sort of videos are for entertainment purposes only, and also it gets a chance to talk about music, have another view of music, and that is a very important thing to do. There's a serious aspect to this, and maybe impart a little bit of knowledge, or you may be interested in my viewpoint. And if I don't like something, you might go, well, I can see why he wouldn't like that, but I love it because my viewpoint's different. So that's my you know, proviso before we get in. But of course, you all coming on and saying how much you hate it, that, you know, will obviously make the algorithm work, and that's what it's all about. And of course, you know, the thing you hate the most, especially the sort of ones who have a very, you know, attention deficit disorder, is the fact that I talk a little bit before I go. And then there's a load of you out there saying, Andy, just get on with it. I want to know what number 10 is. Why don't you put the list so I didn't even have to watch the video? You know, just get on with it. I want to know what you got at number 10 so I know whether to agree with you and think you're the best person in the world, or to get so upset and call you an absolute idiot and say you shouldn't be doing YouTubing because you don't know anything about music. And I'm sure there's going to be many people, for everyone on this list, that gets upset, except for number 7. Number 7, I think, is a weird one when we get there. Shall we start? So at number 10, by one of the most overrated bands in history, we have, by Kiss, Destroyer. Right? Now, the first Kiss album's not so bad, but to me, they are a rubbish rock band. I love rock and I love heavy, and I didn't know whether to do this about Kiss because it feels like I'm having to go at low-hanging fruit in a way, because they've got an incredible image. They sort of embody rock music. There's a whole sort of theatre around them, which I actually do like very much. I've seen them live in I think the early 2000s, maybe late 90s, when they did the Kiss Alive tour, and the show was incredible. Now, there's a bunch of classic albums. A lot of people think Alive 2 is their greatest album, which sort of, it has, I suppose, better versions, if you can call them that, of the tracks on the preceding albums. But I think in terms of their studio albums, and the album that often will come up as being the greatest Kiss album is Destroyer. And that's the album I have at number 10. Destroyer is truly awful. And to double check, I put it on again. And it's just full of dodgy sound effects. It's full of limp riffs. They're not even riffs, just like turgid power chords. The drums sound like they were recorded down some corridor. The vocals are ridiculous. And I thought, how can I best explain how awful this album is? Right? So I'm just going to take one track and just have a bit of a go at that. So there's a track on there called God of Thunder. Now, this is where, for me, everything that's bad in heavy rock and heavy metal is birthed at this point. Up until now, this is a great music form. It's cool. It's, you know, Led Zeppelin were cool. You know, Deep Purple were cool. The guys have got long hair. They look cool. They play the guitar. They got all poses. And then suddenly the makeup comes in, and this sort of comedy, sort of focus on mythology, which, when done well, can be very exciting. But when it's done badly, like this, it's truly bad. And this is really what's responsible for this awful Marvel Comics view of rock, you know. Now, when this track opens up, right, it sounds like they've ripped off Devil Woman by Cliff Richard, except that Devil Woman is darker, it's more dangerous, and the riff is cooler. Right, that's the bottom line. They can't even pull off a decent rip-off of Cliff Richard. Right, God of Thunder is absolutely awful. Right, they also have these sort of ballads, and the ballads are just tuneless dreck. There's a ballad on here called Great Expectations, and I just want to read out the lyrics to this because this is truly awful. Right, not only is it like sexist nonsense, but it seems illogical, and it seems arrogant, and it seems to not make sense lyrically, and these awful lyrics are then tried to be pushed into the song, and they don't fit, and you feel that nothing's great about this band, in my opinion. Right, so I'll go through the lyrics for you. And then you stand and clutch your breast. That's how it opens up. There's a woman there, she's standing, she's clutching her breast. Why is this lady clutching her breast, we wonder? The reason is in the next sentence. Our music drives you wild along with the rest. There's Kiss up on stage, they're playing, driving all the women, they're all clutching their breasts, but they decide to pick on this particular one. You watch me singing this song, you see what my mouth can do. This is the point where my criticism of the lyrics isn't even needed. We can just sit back. You know, how many minds of youthful young prepubescent boys were destroyed by this pap? And you wish you were the one I was doing it to. And you watch me playing guitar, and you feel what my fingers can do. And you wish you were the one I was doing it to. Well, listen. You've got great expectations. You've got great expectations. Right, that's the chorus. Now, this is truly wretched, right? It's not even funny. At some point, Kiss, write this album, went, oh, what shall we write a song about? And they went, why don't we take Charles Dickens for inspiration? What a brilliant idea. Shall we do a tune called Oliver's Twist? No, I don't think so. What about Uriah Heep? Didn't they name themselves after a character from Charles Dickens? That's they did. Oh, well, I think we should pursue this idea. What other ones did they, other, novels by the great Dickens? What about Great Expectations? Oh, I like that. What's that about? It's about a young boy that comes from a low family, but there's this promise that he can go out and, be something in the world. But when he gets there, it's undone by the fact that the benefactor that's made him to do this is from lowly stock, and it questions class and the pretensions on which class is built. At which they went, what could it not just be about some of the girls in the audience having the expectations of having sex with us? Oh God, that's cool. That would be a great expectation of the women of our fan base, wouldn't it? We could put that into their mind, couldn't we? Oh yeah, let's write a song about it. So this is what we get. You've got great expectation. You've got great expectation. You're dying to receive and wave and call my name. But in the din, it seems that I'm a million miles away. It's just so egomaniacal. You watch me beating my drum, and you know what my hands can do, and you wish you were the one I was doing it to. Right? And that's... I won't carry on. I think I'll rest my case. This album comes up as one of the greatest Kiss albums ever made. It's in classic rock. I know so many guys said, oh, Destroy is amazing. this is not amazing. This is overrated. It probably should be at number 1, but this isn't in an order. Right, shall we move on? I'm going to upset somebody else. Right, so at number 9, I have an album that I do love very much, and it is Trout Mask Replica by Captain Beefheart. Right, so we got another type of overrated here. Right, I believe that Safe as Milk and the albums like Lick My Decals Off that are either side of this album are better albums. Okay, I think that Trout Mask Replica has gone down in history because Frank Zappa produced it, and because the story that goes along with it, and because it's got a little bit like Metal Machine music by Lou Reed. It's gone down as being an unlistenable album. It is so abstract and weird. It is Zappa's production was avant-garde, to say the least, and it is a great album, and it represents something fantastic in sort of music history, but I think it's overrated. And I do believe if that wasn't the album that anybody that's exploring Captain Beefheart has been told to get, if they were going and getting Spotlight Kid or Doc on the Radar Station, the stuff he did in the early 80s, where his vision is realised. I always felt, see, I've gone serious now, see, I'm going to being a serious YouTuber, I can do it. I've always felt that that the vision that Beefheart had was not fully realised on this album. I think that what Beefheart wanted to do was bring elements of Delta blues, elements of psychedelia, elements of free jazz, and he wanted to bring them together in a way that was novel and supported his sort of almost Dadaistic poetry. And I think this vision, which the thing that I think that did Beefheart in, is I think the way he was brought up as a child, he was told he was an artistic prodigy at a young age. And he had this wonderful thing, which I think is you have to be a truly innovative artist. A lot of artists suffer with self-doubt, self-loathing, and they never think what they can do is good enough. But there's this other breed that thinks that the world is just a playground and they're just there to pull it all in. And I feel Beefheart's a little bit like that, and he believes that any sort of self-expression is worthy. And I think that what Frank Zappa did was to try and bring that out and give it full control. So what happened in the end was he then took this autocratic, totalitarian control over the band, and his vision actually compromised it, because there is a yin to keep Beefheart's yang. It needs to be drawn in, it needs to be concise, and I feel that the later albums did that. And he moves towards something that was actually quite commercial. And of course, the Beefheart fans that just, they want the hardcore stuff. There's always those type of fans will say, "Oh, they're terrible albums." They're not terrible albums. All Beefheart's albums are great. This is a great album. I just feel that the fact it is rated so highly has done Beefheart a disservice, and that is why it's on the list. And if you are one of those people like me for many years that went and got Trout Mask Replica, and you thought, well, yeah, that's weird, but and you put your ears in and hoped it would give up its treasures for you, and it did, but it didn't until I went and got I think I got Spotlight Kid, and when I heard that, I suddenly thought, oh, I get what he's doing now. There are actual parts there, and these parts are like written and they're controlled and they fit together like a jigsaw puzzle, and this band has to negotiate it around something that doesn't have bar lines, that doesn't have like verse and chorus structures, but is more of a stream of consciousness around Beefheart's vocal. But it's not just improvised, this is tight and controlled, and it eschews the sort of cliche of popular music with a cool beat and and a riff all the way through, the simplisticness that undoes pop music. And tries to go back to the blues, but in a way which is far more complex, and that is what he's trying to do on Trout Rap. Oh, that was such a good. It's hard when you do these videos. You want to be cogent, you want to, be articulate, and it's like being a surfer. You get on the wave and you like that, you think, oh, this is going well, because you don't know what you're about to say. I don't script this, it's the whole point of my videos. And you're on the wave and you just think, I'm just going to get to the beach and I'll be able to bang. Number 8, I have an album that keeps coming up in the greatest albums of all time lists, and I don't know why. I absolutely don't know why. It is the album Introducing, which is by DJ Shadow. All right, this album came out, when did it come out? In the 90s. I bought it the day it came out. Back then, I was listening to so much hip-hop and electronica, trip-hop. I was listening to the, Massive Attack. I was listening to Michelle Ndegeocello, and I was following what was going on at that time, And this album came out, and the critics were like, oh, this is incredible. Now, the reason why it was credible was because this album was created out of other albums. It's the pinnacle of, like, sample art. It is. And I think maybe people thought that this was groundbreaking for doing that. I got the album, and I thought it was okay. That is what I thought at the time. And I have the album to this day. I haven't listened to it for years, and I haven't listened to it for this video because I didn't think I needed to. Maybe if I went back and listened to it now, I would go, "Now this is all wonderful. I didn't get it." But what I have found is those artists that started sampling, when that sampling thing happened, it was more of a novelty than anything else. People thought it was incredible. You need to take the Beastie Boys' first album, take the Led Zeppelin drum beat and loop that round, and then loop that round, and then rap over the top. And I think what happened is that the use of samples became far more sophisticated. And now when I hear that, at least, I'm like, well, what is the point? And so I don't think these albums have worn well. Maybe people feel that it was very influential. Well, I can tell you at the time it wasn't particularly influential. This was more like the educated elites of the music magazines like Wire, cottoning onto something that had already happened. Introducing is a good album. It's an interesting album, but why it keeps coming up, I'm not too sure. I think it's one of these albums that the critics love when they missed out on LL Cool J or whatever was happening in the 1980s that they should have been on top of. They missed it. I think that's what happened. And by the mid-90s, they felt like they needed to champion something that didn't have any rapping on because they didn't like that. And that pointed to a bunch of records, and they could sit there looking, knowingly at the sample list that was on there going, oh, that's a cool album. And that is a snobbery that exists inside hip-hop, is the all-knowing ability to be able to go, oh, that I think that's from the Groove Merchant album that came out in 1973, that loop, that hi-hat there, it's that type of thing. And Introducing is a wet dream for people like that. Anyway, now I'm going to move to number 7. Now, this is a funny one. Now, I made a mistake here. The album I've got at number 7 is Secret Treaties by Blue Oyster Cult. Except, and you can see on the text, it says not Secret Treaties. Now, so I'm going to tell you how I arrived at this. When I was a young lad, I had a cassette tape. I've told this story before in relation to Van Halen. And on that cassette tape that someone done with, it was written down as Blue Oyster Cult. And it wasn't. It was Van Halen. It was side 2 of Van Halen 1. I heard this tape and thought it was amazing. And I wanted to get the whole album. So I went out to try and find which Blue Oyster Cult album this was. I went down to my local record store and they had one Blue Oyster Cult album in there called Secret Treaties. I took it home and put it on, and I was appalled at how awful this album was. I waited for Ice Cream Man to come on, and it never came on, and I thought, what the hell am I listening to? It sounded like, some naive, incompetent rock band. It wasn't like the rock I was listening to. It wasn't like Van Halen. It wasn't like Tigers of Pantang. It wasn't like Iron Maiden. It was not, the drum sounds were boxy. It was all a little bit rubbish. I didn't quite get it. It's got this pencil drawing on the front. And I was so upset by how rubbish this album was that I took it back to the record shop and I swapped it, probably for something by Def Leppard. So that's what I did. And for the whole of my life, I have thought, God, that was a rubbish album. So as time's gone on, once the internet comes out and you can like Google stuff, I once decided to Google. I thought, what was that album that I had that was rubbish by Blue Oyster Cult? Secret Treaties. I'll Google it because it'll probably say this is their worst album, and because I'm sure, I by then I'd heard like Godzilla and I'd heard like Don't Fear the Reaper, and there was Blue Oyster Cult stuff I liked, and I thought, well, I like that stuff. Godzilla I think is one of the greatest rock tracks ever made. It would be on my compilation of great rock songs, but that Secret Treaties was rubbish. And so I Googled it, and the fans were like, this is one of their greatest albums. Many people saying it was their greatest album. I was totally confused by it. So when it came to do this video, I thought, I've never talked about Blue Oyster Cult, the reason being why, because I bought this rubbish album. And I thought, I'm going to put Secret Treaties on. So I wrote them on at number 7. I've got my list, Secret Treaties. And a lot of the reasons is because when I do these lists, really, I just want to talk about a certain band. Certain bands I know everything about. Blue Oyster Cult I know a lot less about. And it just gets me a chat. Yeah, people wonder what I think. What does Andy think of Killing Joke? Somebody put that up yesterday. And, it gives me a chance to talk about bands that I don't know that much about. You got to understand my channel is about me just talking about music. I don't do that much research. It's my experience of being me. That's what this all is. This is why you come here, I suppose, just to see what I'm going to say about something. It seems to entertain people. I don't know why. It's a mystery to me. But I am going off topic now. And I will get back onto the topic of Secret Treaties. So, I sat down, and once I got this list up, I thought, I'll have a quick listen. I listened to Destroyer. I did listen to Trout, Replica because I like that, and I've listened to that load. I didn't listen to Introducing, and I went and listened to Secret Treaties. I put it on, got the headphones on, I put this album on. It's a masterpiece. It's absolutely brilliant. It's like, it's got a rawness of punk combined with a sort of progressive rock, sort of abandon. It's got a raw, gutsy rock and roll edge to it. It's cool. The vocals are cool. Was it Buck Dharma, the guitar player? The guitaring is amazing, but it's amazing in a different way. It's artistic. This album's incredible. And then I look back and I thought, this is 1974. When you think that what's going on in rock at that time, this is forward thinking, and it really is a blueprint of how rock bands are going to combine with sort of new wave bands and punk bands to create something that has sort of elements of progressive rock and elements of punk, which we see with the new wave of British heavy metal. This is an incredible album, and I thought, I don't want to waste this. I want to champion this album and stand up and go, I love Secret Treaties, and so that's why I decided to keep it on the list rather than just trying to find some other, less average album and put it at number 7. So that's what I've done, is so I can go and say, I love Secret Treaties. I need to explore Blue Oyster Cult more. I really do. I did get another album by them. It's the one with Don't Fear the Reaper on. I think it's that one. You see how little I know about Blue Oyster Cult. It's the one where it's got the guy with the cards on the front. It's their most famous album, Agents of Fortune. See, this is really going on my sort of distant. That's what I feel it's called. I bought that, and I can remember it just had loads of brass sections on it. I might have got this all wrong. I feel that Blue Oyster Cult I have missed out on, because I love this album, and I thought, why did I get rid of this? I could have that on vinyl now in my collection. I could hold it up and say, look, this is a great album. I missed out. And this is the idiocy of youth. This is the idiocy of nuance and subtlety, and not being able to understand sometimes certain groups. And when I was young, I would, if it was like a Miles Davis album, I would give it the work, because I knew Miles Davis was great, even though I didn't understand it. But Blue Oyster Cult, I saw them in the same bracket as sort of Black Sabbath, and I love Black Sabbath. I thought, how is this Black Sabbath? This isn't like Black Sabbath. This is more like Grand Funk Railroad or something. And I've always had a low opinion of American rock bands anyway. I loved Lynyrd Skynyrd. I loved ZZ Top. I didn't love loads of American rock bands, to be fair. But Blue Oyster Cult were like the American rock band, weren't they, in the 70s? I don't know. I wanted to explore this. And I want to put it out there because my experience of listening, maybe you go, God, yeah, that's exactly how I felt about so-and-so, and I didn't get it at the time. And I regret it. Why didn't I get it? Because you were young and because you didn't have the experience and you didn't have the understanding. You know, the Blue Oyster Cult, rather than being some sort of not that competent band, which is how I perceived it, were actually more competent than I could understand at that time. Very interesting. Right, number 6. This is going to upset them all now. I can't help but do. You got to understand me, right? I don't do it for clicks. I do not do it for views. Right, I have been like this all my life. If I was in a room and there was a red button, it said "Do not press." I'm going to press that button. And these sort of triggering buttons, I can't help but press. And it has got me into trouble recently, and I'm about to do it now. Right, and this album I have championed on this channel, and I've talked at length about how great it is, but I do think it's overrated, and I'm going to tell you why. So at number 6, I have Oyster by Steely Dan. If the world is so full of conflict at the moment, and we've got these terrible wars going on, but if ever the Pink Floyd fans decide to gang up on the Steely Dan fans, that is the end of the world, because they will not have these bands critiqued in any way whatsoever. And I know that, and I can't help but push the button, which is what I've done. I think Oyster is overrated. And you're sat there going, and he doesn't really think that. He loves that album. Right, I don't love that album. I like that album. It's a pleasant, middle-of-the-road, late 70s jazz fusion album. It errs towards the Muzak for me. It's not funky enough, and it's not heavy enough. But it's a nice, pleasant album. The playing on it is absolutely fantastic, right? But for me, this album is hobbled a little bit by what hobbles all Steely Dan for me. It's a bit anal retentive, and it's a bit like, their attempt at perfection. And I don't like that. If you like that, you are welcome to it. And I champion you for loving the fact that everything is in its place and it's in just the right place. And the fact that you like that is very great. And I'm sure you're a very conscientious person, unlike me, and you've had a good life where you've been able to hold down a job and not have to go and work in the music industry, where you've been able to be conscientious and plan well because you like things orderly and in their place. You don't like dishevelment. You don't like the, people falling all over the place, hitting bum notes and dropping beats here and there. I understand it all. And Steely Dan, right? When you get that sort of anal, retarded music, right? Brilliantly played, with brilliant playing on, exciting playing. But then, if you want to leech, this is worse than I thought. Now I'm going to backtrack. Not leech. Of course, Wayne Shorter is a genius. Steve Gadd's a genius. If you put him in the studio and just let him loose, it will be genius. I love when that happens, right? And the great thing about Steely Dan, artistically, is their lyrics. Their lyrics are dark. Their lyrics are like knowing. Their sort of postmodern take on the world, of two guys that had grown up in the 1950s with that idea of the future, the shiny future that they were going to go into, and then arriving it in the 70s, and it's different, and it's they've got like sort of it's almost like a beat poet Kerouac approach, but it's not beatnik Kerouac at all. It's tight, controlled attempt at making everything so neat. It's the thing that when little boys go to the toilet and they have to try and learn how to aim, right? That is something that boys have, is that becomes a sort of ethic or moral good thing that you have to do, is not miss the toilet. And that's what I hear. Now, you see, but you said you like the Wayne Short stuff. I'll tell it now. People go on about Asia. This is why I think it's overrated. People go on about Asia. The musos love it. They'll go on about Larry Carlton's guitar playing. They will go on about Steve Gadd's drumming, right? I'm a huge Steve Gadd fan. I love that solo on Asia. But I'm a huge Steve Gadd fan. I've got hundreds of albums where he solos like that. The soloing and playing he does on Night Sprites off Chick Corea's Leprechaun blows it out the park. The soloing he does on Three Quartets blows it out the park. There's 100 of albums where Gadd is just off the scale all the time. And I don't have to put up with all Steely Dan's, like, you know, pseudo beatnik stuff, which I know elevates this music up, but I'm absolutely not interested in it. You know, I could get what's the album? Oh, I can't remember it. I've got a couple of Larry Carlton albums. You know, he's got Jeff Porcaro on drums. You know, he's probably got like Abe Laboriel on bass, and they're great, and he's playing brilliant. But this type of fusion is that middle of the road fusion that emerged when the record companies start to get tired, you know, when the sales start to drop off for the outlandish fusion, the Mavish Nuxtra and Return to Forever, and they were starting to ask for hit records. It all got very tight, and it moved from sort of creative jazz artists to session musicians making music. And I do love those albums. So to me, you know, if I listen to Asia, I may as well just put on Voyeur by David Sanborn. They're just as great. In fact, the musically, you know, what's going on Voyeur, you know, Run for Cover is funkier. It's blacker. It's more rooted in soul and funk than Steely Dan is. Steely Dan is groovy, but it's like a white groove. And some of those of you are going to shout at me because I thought you didn't believe in black music. That's gone now. I realise that what I was trying to get across is not going to be got across with that. But anyway, we'll move on from there. Don't get yourself bogged down in that. Should we move on to number 5, right? Number 5 is an album that I really like, and it's a great album. It's 2112 by Rush. Most Rush fans seem to treat this album as though it's the greatest album they ever made. If I say Moving Pictures is a perfect album, they will come on and say, no, Hemispheres is great. Farewell to Kings is great, and 2112 is great. And I think because 2112 is the first successful progressive rock album, this is what's interesting with Rush, is Rush's first album is a hard rock album, and then Caress of Steel is without doubt a progressive rock album. Fly By Night is a progressive rock album, but these albums didn't sell. Then 2112 came out and it sold loads and it catapulted the band. In fact, it saved the band. This album, for some reason, worked where Fly By Night and Caress of Steel didn't. And I don't know why. I just don't know why. Partly it could be a triumph of arrangement because we've got the epic up front. Epics take a little bit of energy to get through, right? And a sidelong epic works because you have an album of like shorter songs and you have a sidelong track. And it opens up with a sidelong track called 2112. And the opening, the overture going into Temples of the Syrinx is, up until that point, probably Rush's greatest moment. It is sublime and incredible. And I can remember buying this album and putting that on, and that started up, and I thought, by the time I got 5 minutes in, that I was listening to the greatest album ever made. But then what followed up was a load of quite like endless acoustic guitar strumming in a cave and trying to tell this story. And I felt it just, compared to something like Hemispheres, it just sags in the middle for me. It felt like songs that were stitched together. I mean, Fountains of Lamneth that's on the album, that is so badly stitched together. Rush didn't have the capability of doing what Yes could do and unorganise a whole side long. It does feel like separate tracks that have been put together with bookends on. It's better than that. And 2112, it's good, but Xanadu, which is short, it's 10 minutes long, but Xanadu is like an absolute masterpiece. Cygnus X1's a masterpiece. Hemispheres is a masterpiece. Camera is a masterpiece. Tide Pools, or whatever that one's called, they're masterpiece. Jacob's Ladder, these are the great epics by Rush. 2112 will always go down. The fans will like it. I know no one's going to agree with me, but I think 2112 doesn't quite hang together. But the beginning and the end are fantastic. And that's Stairway to Heaven at the moment, where he sings right at the end, and the meek shall inherit the earth. You know, whatever he sings at the end, I can't remember what, and he does at the beginning. And so you go through this journey, you're a kid, you sat reading the lyrics, you follow the story through. You can't believe that a band's actually told a story, albeit some sort of Ayn Rand, you know, right-wing influenced idea of libertarianism gone mad. That they live to regret doing. I warn you, never go towards the right wing. They don't like it. People don't like it. Once you've been tarred with that, you don't want to go down there. And it's, you know, Rush have had to backpedal on that. So that is 2112. Good, but I think loved because of the incredible beginning. And then you get through and no one says, oh, I'm going to put the middle of 2112 on. Nobody does that. And the ending, and you get that stereotype moment when then you get that lone voice at the end and it tails off and it gives you a little bit of, ooh. Which is a device you could always do. Right now, you turn it over, and what you get is a load of okay Rush songs. There's no Tom Sawyer there. There's no The Trees there. There's no Spirit of the Radio there. There's no Free Will. There's no Subdivisions. What we get is a Passage to Bangkok, which has gone down as a sort of classic by Rush. I never really liked it. It seems quite cheesy in a way. It's an ode to a marijuana, I do believe, as Neil Peart goes around the world visiting all these different places in song form where wonderful marijuana comes from, you know, and that's a little bit childish, isn't it? You know, and that's the best one. Then we get a whole ton of middling Rush songs. Something for Nothing has not gone down as a classic, but I like that because it rocked. This album's good, right? But it is not Rush's best, and it is not. It's historic because I think it wasn't the first time probably because they did it on Fly By Night. It is just overrated. It's the right place at the right time album. It's the album that saved Rush's bacon. So that's what I've got at number 5. At number 4, I have Exile on Main Street by the Rolling Stones. Now, people think I don't like the Rolling Stones. If I was to sit down and put Gimme Shelter on now, it would make my hair stand on end. That is a sublime piece of music. It's incredible. If you did put Sympathy for the Devil on, I love that tune. Things like Satisfaction is heavy rock before anyone has done it. It's one of the first great riffs after the Kinks. You know, they're laying the groundwork. They're the blue point for a rock band. You know, they're cool. They swagger, and they swagger like Jagger. Jagger's got the swagger, and he's even got a surname that rhymes with swagger. It's all perfect, right? When they, you know, the early 70s, they did It's Only Rock and Roll, and I used to have that on video. You know, the video of that when then the tent and all the sponge comes out. And I love that, and there's a thing about those Stones that I do like. What it is they've been around a long time, and they make some albums I really like, and some albums I don't so much like. So, again, and it's this thing, Blue Oyster Cult thing. When I was a kid, somebody said, you've got to get a Stones album. You've got not get my mate Rich. He was into the Rolling Stones. He loved the Stones album. I said, "Have you ever heard this? Have you ever heard that?" I said, "No." I said, "Rich, what album shall I get?" He said, "You've got to get Exile on Main Street. It's brilliant." I thought, it's a double album. If I buy that, I got a whole ton of Stones. That seems like a good buy because I get all this stuff. So I went down and got it. I got Exile on Main Street on, and I put it on. And what I was faced with was not that interesting mix of English cultural tropes with American rhythm and blues, which the Rolling Stones were able to do. This was just British people competently mimicking, you know, black rhythm and blues, soul, and I found it just so tedious. Now, I said on another video, and it seemed to make people laugh, but people have mentioned it a lot. I'm not a fan of Americana. I love Robert Johnson. I love Charlie Patton, right? I even do like the band. I think they're an incredible band. Dylan is a genius. But there is a tendency for sort of middle-class people who want to get the whiff of being artistic and culturally aware, and they can do this by learning 3 chords, growing a beard, wearing a hat, maybe a bowler hat, putting a waistcoat on, and then singing music that has got nothing to do with them. And they seem like they are very artistic and sensitive as they strum their way through some song that's either influenced by their idea of what old American music was, or is a terrible version of what old American music was. Now, the reason why this exists is because rock and roll, all music, I don't care what anyone says, all music is always a fusion of it's not one thing or another. You can't have a new cultural form unless it's a fusion of all these different forms, and it's the coming together of different people with different viewpoints that creates new music. And so Britain's take on blues in the 60s was very important in terms of, well, it created rock music. But out of that, you now have this sort of, especially here in the UK, I'm not so worried about American bands doing Americana, but there is a tendency for a sort of middle class, privileged young person that doesn't have to go and get a job when they leave school, to walk around in baggy hippie clothes, smoking joints, hanging around their parents' houses while they strum away on acoustic guitars, thinking that they are Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, or whoever it is that they think's great. Here in the UK, there's that sort of snobbery that surrounds a sort of late 60s English folk bands like Fairport Convention and Incredible String Band, and that all gets combines in, and people think if they're strumming a banjo it makes it worthwhile, and I'm just don't like it. Where am I with this? Exile on Main Street. Exile on Main Street is not that, but it's something else. It's like a British take. Do you remember when U2 went over to Sun Records and recorded that album? They got BB King, and you feel like going, you're Irish, what are you doing? And they're too competent. They're too good at it. They're too good at it. So it sounds almost. It's like vegan food. You want meat, and it almost tastes like meat. That's what Exile on Main Street sounds like to me. Now, I went back and listened to it, and there are tracks on it I like. Tumbling Dice is great. Ventilator Blues, fantastic. And I Just Want to See Your Face is this little weird musical interlude, which is stunning. And I listened to this, I thought, why did the Stones do this more? This sounds like music in the 90s. It's like electronica or weird trip-hop they're doing. Absolutely, there is some amazing moments. Maybe I don't get it. Maybe it's only overrated by me. Maybe it is a masterpiece. I don't know. But going through the rest of it, it was just the next thing, brushing on, all that stuff over and over again. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And it lacks if you go back and listen to Charlie Patton, there's an otherworldliness and a spookiness, and you feel like you're looking at a distant doorway, and opening up that doorway is a realm that nobody understands. And this is just a big selling album. Right, so that's what I've got at number 4 is Exile on Main Street. At number 3, I have got By The Clash, London Calling. Now, there are many people that agree with me on this, and I know Pete Pardo on Sea of Tranquility agrees. I love The Clash. When I was a kid, I had their first album, or I think I had some of that first album on tape. That my mate had done me. I know it had White Riot on, and I was into Motorhead, and I loved all that stuff. And things like, Rock the Casbah. This is all brilliant stuff. Absolutely brilliant stuff. And again, this double album, this extravagant double album by a punk band. I thought this was really interesting. Everyone said it was not just Clash's greatest album, one of the greatest albums ever made. So I went out and bought it. Now, I bought it because I heard the track London Calling. And London Calling is a sublime song. When I hear that song, I feel like I'm in an aeroplane. I feel like I'm travelling over I feel like I'm travelling over London at night, looking down. And it's like this sort of objective view, capturing what's going on at the time. The sort of the pressures and all the sort of cultural mixing that's going on. And you think, this is setting itself up to go beyond punk. We're going to go explore all these different territories on this album. It has something anthemic. Punk can never do this. It's such an achievement within the punk sort of genre to be able to do something which is so arresting. You know, it's an incredible tune. So that starts up, and then there was a track I didn't like, and then Guns of Brixton came on, and it's got this like, you know, reggae, heavy dub reggae, but it's not dub reggae because they got top heads, incredible drumming, and that snarl of Joe Strummer's voice, and this is absolutely amazing. I love this. Thought this is a really great album. I really loved it. And then after that, it just goes into this great big rock and roll pastiche nonsense that just is just forgettable. The two great songs and the rest is forgettable. I don't know whether when this album came out, there were just so many bands around that, again, managed to get a few chords together and they could play tracks off this album. I don't know. I just never have understood it. And I wonder whether so many of these albums have been heralded as great is because they start up great. Think about it. How many albums, if they start up just so great, like London Calling great, that people go, oh, you know, because there's always that thing when you buy an album, well, when people used to buy albums, you know, you have to save your money up and you didn't know what you were buying. You know, you'd go into the shop, especially with a new album, you'd go into the shop, buy this album, you'd take it home. You'd have to carry it around with you. You know, if you're a kid like me, you'd gone shopping with your mom and she's going around Waitrose, you know, buying the shopping, and you've got your album under your thing and you go, oh, I just want to get home. And then you get home and then you go, can I borrow the stereo, Mom? No, it's too noisy. I want to do some else. Yeah. Well, put your headphones on. So you get them, put your headphones on like this and you drop the needle on and you're hoping that you haven't wasted your money. And when that first track kicks in, you're like, oh, thank God for that. And that will see you through. And a lot of the time, you have invested in that band. That's why we have Pink Floyd fans and Steely Dan fans and Led Zeppelin fans. Because back then, you invested yourself in the band. It wasn't like, I like that, I don't like that. It wasn't what it was about. You'd invested yourself in, and you had to deliver. How many of us have listened to a crap album by a band that we love, trying our best to draw any bit of goodness out of it when really it's rubbish? Now with The Clash, I didn't have that. I was exploring, you know, I was exploring at this point, and I just didn't think it was very good. Maybe I don't get it. I am a bit of an opulent prog head that loves virtuosity, and maybe I just don't get the sort of snarl and the sort of visceral power of this band. You know, I don't. Right, so at number 2, I have an album I've spoken about so much on this channel. It won't be a surprise to anybody, but I have The Wall. The Wall is, in a way, Pink Floyd's pinnacle. I've spoken about this so much. How am I going to get something new about this? So why do I think it's overrated? I think it's overrated because it doesn't do what Dark Side of the Moon does or Wish You Were Here. It's just not. It's not as musically interesting as those albums. It's all about the story, and the story takes over. And although things like Another Brick of the World, you know, and Comfortably Numb are absolute masterpieces, a bit like London, they're great. I know they're great, but even people who like it thinks it drags. And I don't like it, but you know, I'm not the hugest of Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd have to really win me over. They really do. I had Echoes on this morning, and that is incredible. And I feel like they come in, it's that beautiful Pink Floyd sound. You feel like it's the whole band is working on that track, and everybody's inputting. And then it goes off onto this psychedelic thing. And when they do it well, they do it well. There's none of that. There's none of that like midsection of Echoes, you know. There's none of that on The Wall. It's an attempt, you know, it's... Roger Waters has played his cards here. He has got control of that band at this point, hasn't he? Really, this is the problem. And he's held to ransom. A little bit like, you know that thing where, you know, John Lord wanted to make an orchestral record with Deep Purple. And he said, like, I really want to do this. I really want to make this record. And they said, all right, then we'll do it. Let's do it. So they go in and do it. It's a failure. And John Lord's happy and they move on. And then Richie Blackmore takes over and they do Deep Purple in Rock. And it's brilliant, right? With Pink Floyd, that's sort of the same thing that happens. Roger Waters goes, right, give me a chance, chaps. Let me do this idea. You know, you nearly gave me the ropes on Animals. I want to do this massive rock opera. It's going to be political. It's going to be this, and this. And they do it. And it's a little bit like Brexit when David Cameron said, well, let's have a referendum. I don't think they ever thought it would be that much of a success. I thought, we'll give Roger what he wants, and then once it's done, we can get back to making Pink Floyd albums. But it was a huge success, despite the fact that it's overblown crap. And overblown crap in 1979 in the wake of punk. God knows what it is. Well, I know what it is because I was there. I remember that video coming out. I can remember the kids sat there singing, "We don't need no education." It's 1979. That was more punk than punk. It was like a shock to the system. I didn't know who these Pink Floyd were. And then you see those totalitarian hammers walking through like this, and all that imagery, Gerald Scarf's brilliant imagery. And that song's incredible. Again, so many of these albums rest upon a great song. It's like 2112. There's a great song there. You buy the album, it pulls you in, and then people sit there and they follow the story. This is at a point where there's no videotape recorders in your house. There's no Netflix. There's no way. You can't watch a film over and over again. If you want to watch a film, you've got to wait. They've got the new James Bond on this Christmas. It only came out 4 years ago. Can't believe it. You sit there wanting to watch the new James. You have to put it in your diary. And then once it's watched, in the 1970s, once it's watched, it's watched. You've got to remember it. People used to take a photograph of the TV screen so they could remember stuff. And now you've got this big story. You can sit there and go through it. And because of that, because of the desperation at that time for people to have this sort of experience in their living room, with their big white album that they could open up like that, and they roll their joint down the middle. It's got that like last little symbol. Right. And everything sounds good then, doesn't it? So you get this thing where it's gone down in history, but it's not that great an album. That's the bottom line. So that's what I've got at number 2 is The Wall. Right, what have I got at number 1? At number 1, I have, and I'm not saying this is the most overrated album of all time, but it could well be, in my opinion, the most overrated album. Because this album often comes up as being, for many people, the greatest album ever made. And I do not get it. And I like this album, but I do not get why everyone thinks it's so great. And it is Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. This is going to upset everybody. I've said it before, but I don't think the Beach Boys are as important as everybody seems to make out. It's like certain people want to make out that this is the American Beatles, but I'm afraid to tell you they're not the Beatles, right? And I tell you why they're not the Beatles, because the Beatles did Rubber Soul, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper, the White Album, and Abbey Road, right? And those are masterpieces, and there is not one Beach Boys album that's anywhere near any of those albums. All right, they're in 1965, 66. I think it's 66, isn't it? When they do Norwegian Wood, could be 65. There is nothing on Pet Sounds. What Pet Sounds is like a vaudeville sound that is out of date, but was still popular in America in the 1950s, which is the barbershop quartet sound. And that's influenced doo-wop, and it's influenced the whole thing. And there's a culture there in the 1950s of people singing barbershop quartet stuff. And the Beach Boys are very clever to take the innovation of Dick Dale, which is this sort of surf rock, combine it with barbershop quartet, and for a few minutes in the early 60s personify what it was like to be in California at that time. And of course, later on, we're going to see that being the location for the Summer of Love. And so they're able to sort of latch onto that. And I always felt the Beach Boys were like rubbish hippies when that time came in. Like they were just not, they were a bit like an anachronism. They're stood there with their hair a little bit longer now. They got their flowery shirts on, but they don't quite fit in at all. They're uncomfortable. Now, I think that Brian Wilson has got obviously had emotional problems. I always feel that he writes all these great pop songs, okay? He has loads of hit records with them, and then he hears the Beatles, and he's like, oh my God, what are we doing? And he tries to shoehorn his approach into what the Beatles are doing. I think he's jealous. And so when Rubber Soul comes out, he hears that, and then he goes, well, I'm going to get in the studio. And again, he does a Roger Waters. He kicks the rest of the band out, and he just takes control. He brings all these incredible session musicians in, and he just starts to go mad in the studio. And the studio experimentation he does in 1966 is very interesting, and there's some really interesting sounds and layers of stuff going on this album, and there's nothing I'm going to criticize. It's a fantastic album. In 1966, this is an important album, and I'm aware that you heard it. Now on there you have song-wise "Wouldn't It Be Nice," which is cheesy but is a great song, and again you can hear that lament for a past that's gone. The Beatles are looking forward. The Beatles are like, oh my God, there's a new world ahead of us. But this isn't that. This is sort of the old world of the barbershop quartet going, what is going on? And it's trying to almost like grab at a nostalgia. It's a lament for growing up. It's and a lot of the lyrics are about that. Wouldn't it be nice? It's like that. And God only knows. And I did crack a few jokes about it and compared it to the theme to Jim Will Fix It, which is if you're British you'll know. Why the fact that it even sounds remotely like the Jim Will Fix It theme just basically destroys any love you have for God Only Knows. And God Only Knows is a fantastic song. And it inspired Paul McCartney, and they came back with Revolver. And God Only Knows is a fantastic song. I'm being trite, but the rest of the album is just lots of quite interesting arranged stuff, quite interesting use of the studio. Now, in 65, 66, Frank Zappa in America had made the album absolutely free. Go and listen to that, and whatever innovations are on this album, it knocks the innovations of Pet Sounds into a cocked hat, right? So I'm not diminishing its worth, but for me, that for it to be an album where people say this is the greatest album ever made, it's up there, the top 5 albums, blah blah blah, right? What other classic tracks are on there? Sloop, John B. What's that one about? Is that the one? I mean, I've got the album and I like it, and I had a spate of listening to it over and over again. And I thought I was worthy listening to it. I thought this is one of the greatest albums ever made, And I bought it and I'd put it on the car, and it's an enjoyable album. And I thought, isn't Brian Wilson a genius? What he's done here is really incredible, isn't it? I mean, the production's all a bit tinny and it's all a bit middly, and they've pushed the overdubbing too far, so it doesn't sound great. But it's a worthy album. And it is resting on all these incredible session players, really, and what they're bringing to it. But it is, and after a while, I just listened to it over and over again, and I had this initial, burst of thinking this is one of the greatest albums ever made, and then I start to go, well, is it really, or is it just quite a good album that came out in 1966? And I did a video on 1966, and I went through all the incredible albums that came out in that year. You can go and check it out and see there's so much incredible music coming out at that time by all sorts of different bands. So for me, why is John Mayall's Beano album with the Clapton on, which basically lays the blueprint of rock music, why is that not being held up? That people automatically think that. Anyway, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like it. And if you want to see some more, subscribe. If you want to support me, I have a link to my Patreon down below, or you can put a donation in my PayPal tip jar, or you can go to my Bandcamp as well and download one of my albums. That's always, you can support me. I hope you enjoyed this. Please take it that there's a lot of humour in this. This is entertainment. In the end, it's entertainment. Can you hear that? It's the Steely Dan police. They're coming to get me. How did they know I even said this? It's not even on the internet yet. Right, I've got to get out of here. Come on, let's go.